Welcome. Today's topic is CMMC Level 2 Requirement 315, Controlling Remote Execution of Privileged Commands and Access to Security Relevant Information. Let's look at Practice Requirement 3115 and its assessment objectives. 3115 authorize remote execution of privileged commands and remote access to security relevant information. That's broken up into the assessment objectives. A, identify privileged commands authorized for remote execution, and B, identify security relevant information that's authorized for remote access. Once we identify these things, then C, authorize remote execution of the commands that you identified, and D, authorize remote access to the security relevant information that you identified. For compliance, you must clearly identify and document which privileged commands and sensitive information can be accessed remotely and formally authorize those actions. Let's look at some ways to implement this control. One is to limit remote command execution to specific administrative tools, like PowerShell, restricting remote shell access to admins. Another is to only allow access to security logs for designated roles by way of VPN or MFA, meaning allowing only certain individuals to access event logs remotely. Those admins that need them in a remote situation only. And maintain an approval list of authorized personnel and commands, so keeping up-to-date authorization lists. As a contractor, what are some of your documented procedures? Well, let's start with policies. Develop and document specifying who may execute privileged commands remotely. Also, define authorized remote access methods. In effect, virtual private network or multi-factor authentication use. And document approval and review processes for command and information access. In short, organizations need to create written policies, list the approved tools, and detail how access is granted, how it's reviewed, how it's revoked, and remember to train staff accordingly. Let's look at implementation using Microsoft's Government Community Cloud with primary services, Entra ID, and privileged identity management for this control. Entra ID, the old Azure AD for administrative identity and access control, also implement PIM, just-in-time privileged access, and leverage the GCC tenant security and role-based access control features. Microsoft's GCC with Entra ID and PIM support requirement 3115 by enabling granular access control, approval workflows, and auditability for privileged and sensitive remote operations. Let's recap with key takeaways. Identify and document all remotely executable privileged commands and accessible security data. Strictly control and authorize remote privileged actions. And leverage tools like Entra ID and privileged identity management for efficiency and evidence. Clear identification, robust documentation, strict authorization, and centralized controls are essential for CMMC Level 2 compliance. We'll pause here for any questions, and feel free to email me at either address for your questions. Welcome. Today's topic, CMMC Level 2 Requirement 3.1.16, Wireless Access Authorization. 3.1.16, authorize wireless access prior to allowing wireless access connections. Remember, do not subtract points if wireless access is not permitted. Let's look at the assessment objectives. A, wireless access points are identified, and B, wireless access is authorized prior to allowing such connections. You need to be able to demonstrate that you know where all your wireless access points are located and that no connection is permitted without formal authorization. This means establishing usage restrictions and configuration or connection requirements for wireless access to the system, and provide criteria for your organization to support wireless access authorization decisions. Let's look at things you need to do in your organization for compliance. Maintain an inventory of all wireless access points. Remember to keep an up-to-date list of access points. Require management approval before enabling any wireless access. This means written approval before any wireless is enabled. Implement controls to disable unauthorized or rogue wireless access points so that you can quickly disable or remove any unauthorized device. Wireless networks use authentication protocols that provide credential protection and mutual authentication. To establish usage restrictions, wireless access points need to be identified and authorized. Let's recap a bit more about those organizational procedures for your organization. Remember to have a clear wireless network policy in place and ensure that all requests for wireless access go through proper review. Then make sure to audit your environment to confirm that only authorized connections exist. Your organizational guidelines may include the following: types of devices, such as corporate or privately owned equipment, configuration requirements of those devices, and authorization requirements before granting such connections. Let's look at implementation using Microsoft Government Community Cloud, again with the Intune or Intune suite. Use Microsoft Intune to manage device compliance and wireless configurations. Apply security baselines for Wi-Fi profiles. Monitor wireless access with reporting tools in Intune suite within GCC environment. Remember, Intune makes it easier to enforce authorized wireless profiles and monitor connections at the device level. This aligns with CMMC by ensuring only managed and approved devices can join wireless networks. What are our key takeaways here? We need to identify, document, and then authorize all wireless access points. No exceptions allowed. Use modern management tools for enforcement and monitoring. Wireless access is a key risk area. We need to control it strictly. Modern tools like Intune simplify authorization and continuous monitoring. And we'll pause here for any questions. please feel free to email me as well at either address. Today, we'll review NIST 800 Requirement 3117 on how to protect wireless access with both authentication and encryption as required for CMMC Level 2 compliance. Let's look at 3117, the practice requirement, and also the assessment objectives. The requirement states, protect wireless access using authentication and encryption. What does this mean? A, wireless access to the system is protected using authentication. And B, wireless access to the system is protected using encryption. You must ensure that all wireless connections require trusted user authentication and use strong encryption methods to safeguard that sensitive data. Organizations authenticate individuals and devices to help protect wireless access to the system. Special attention is given to the wide variety of devices that are part of the Internet of Things with potential wireless access to organizational systems. Let's look at some actions you need to implement to comply with this practice requirement. Configure Wi-Fi for enterprise-grade authentication. For example, WPA2-Enterprise. Require unique credentials or digital certificates for users and devices. Enable strong encryption such as WPA2 or WPA3 for all wireless networks. Examples include ensuring users log in with their credentials for wireless using certificate-based authentication and only allowing connections encrypted with WPA2 or better. Wireless access points need to be identified and authorized and encrypted. The most common authentication and encryption methods used will include WPA2-PSK, which stands for Wi-Fi Protected Access Pre-Shared Key, and WPA2-Enterprise. Open authentication must not be used because it authenticates any user and lacks security capabilities. Let's look at those documented policies and procedures that you need. So remember to have a documented policy for wireless security, periodically audit settings and credentials, and make sure that all personnel understand both procedures and risks. Ask these questions. Is wireless access limited only to authenticated and authorized users? For example, required to supply a username and password? If our organization is securing its wireless network with a pre-shared key, is access to that key restricted to only authorized users? And is wireless access encrypted using FIPS 140-2 or better validated cryptography? Note that simply using an approved algorithm is not sufficient. The module could be software or hardware, and that module that's used to implement the algorithm must be separately validated under FIPS 140-2 or FIPS 140-3. Okay, so how do we implement this control with Microsoft Government Community Cloud and Intune or Intune Suite? We deploy Wi-Fi profiles by way of Intune with the required authentication. Authentication means the certificate, username, password. We enforce minimum encryption standards for all wireless connections. And we monitor compliance and device configuration through Intune dashboards. Remember, Intune in Microsoft GCC can automate deployment of secure Wi-Fi configurations. It also enforces encryption and ensures only properly authenticated devices access the network. Let's look at key takeaways for protecting wireless access to make sure it's authenticated and encrypted. Strong authentication and encryption are non-negotiable for protection and compliance. Use enterprise-grade Wi-Fi security like WPA2 or WPA3 Enterprise. And management tools like Intune will simplify compliance and ongoing monitoring. And we'll pause here for any questions. And feel free to email me at either of the addresses, jim@cpisys.com. Okay, now let's look at NIST 800-171 requirement 3.1.18, controlling mobile device connections. This is another requirement for CMMC Level 2 compliance. All right, let's look in more detail at 3.1.18, the practice requirement, and the assessment objectives for controlling the connection of mobile devices. A, identify mobile devices that process, store, or transmit CUI. And B, authorize those mobile device connections. Then C, monitor and log mobile device connections. This requirement ensures that all mobile devices accessing CUI are identified, that only authorized devices connect, and that connections are tracked for security. We'll discuss establishing those guidelines and acceptable practices for proper configuration, for use, and for management of mobile devices. Devices that process, store, or transmit CUI must be identified with a device-specific identifier. In addition to smartphones, consider the security of other portable devices, such as e-readers and tablets. Here's examples of actions that your organization will need for compliance. Practical actions include keeping a current list of devices, vetting them before granting access, logging every connection, and prohibiting unknown or unauthorized connections. Additional usage restrictions and implementation guidance for mobile devices would include device identification and authentication, configuration management, implementation of mandatory protective software like malicious code detection, and disabling unnecessary hardware like wireless or infrared. All right, let's look at those documented procedures and policies in your organization. Define and document mobile device in your policies. What is a mobile device? Due to the large variety of mobile devices with different technical characteristics and capabilities, organizational restrictions may vary for the different types of devices. Require users to formally request device access. Document device authorizations. And then regularly review and update your device lists. Audit those connection logs and report anomalies. Remember to set up approval processes and establish regular reviews. Regular audits help catch risky behavior early and keep your organization out of risk. Now let's look at contractor implementation using Microsoft Government Community Cloud with the Intune and Intune Suite service. Use Intune to register and manage devices. It helps also by enforcing policies like encryption, password, application controls. And be sure to start with compliant devices for your organization. Use those compliant devices, define them before granting GCC access. Intune will monitor device connections and generate logs for you. For organizations using Microsoft GCC and the Intune Suite, that will help you streamline mobile device control. They automate compliance checks, logging, and remediation for strong CUI protection. Let's look at key takeaways. All mobile devices with CUI access must be identified, authorized, and monitored. Use automated tools like Intune to support compliance. Keep documentation, approvals, and activity logs up to date. The key really here is knowing which devices that you want to connect and enforcing approval and keeping detailed logs. Automation through GCC Suite can strengthen your defenses and your compliance posture. And we'll pause here for any questions. Feel free to email me at jim@cpisys or jgoodrich@manixconsulting.com. Thank you.